There is an island where hundreds of decapitated dolls hang limply from the trees, and when night falls, they search for a body to replace their own. In the region of Xochimilco, south of Mexico City, amidst a network of ancient canals and dense green swamps, there is an island that locals rarely dare to mention after sunset. Its name is Isla de las Muñecas, Island of the Dolls. But don't let that innocent name fool you. There, dolls are not toys. They are shattered souls, silent witnesses to a tragedy. Ghosts of a past that never found peace. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of dolls, with rotting bodies, severed limbs, and hollow glass eyes, hang from the twisted branches, as if watching every person who dares to set foot on the island. People say that if you stay until nightfall, you'll hear the giggles of children echoing from beneath the water. Then come the eerie whispers among the trees, as if the dolls are talking to each other, or to you. But what makes the haunted island of the dolls in Mexico one of the most terrifying places in the world isn't just the setting, it's the story behind it. A lonely man, a drowned little girl, and a whisper from the other side turned the island into a memorial of haunting that has lasted more than half a century. Stay until the end, because this is not just a legend. This is a place where the island of the dolls is still alive and waiting for you to listen.
The place where dolls whisper must begin where the water holds the memories of the dead. To understand Isla de las Muñecas, you must return to what was once the heart of the Aztec civilization, Xochimilco, the land of water spirits and pathways not meant for cars but for boats that glide silently through reed forests and the distant cries of night herons. Xochimilco, from the Nahuatl language, means the field of flowers on the water. It was once a brilliant agricultural ecosystem developed by the Aztecs using chinampa, a system of man-made floating fields. But beyond being a food production center, Xochimilco was also seen as a transition zone between the world of the living and the dead, a sacred place, a gateway. Today, in that picturesque setting, trajineras, colorful boats, carry tourists through a maze of canals. But there is one route not everyone dares to book: the journey to the island of the dolls, where boatmen often glance quietly into the water, as if afraid of something lurking beneath. They say some canals are never truly calm. Waters suddenly change color, birds refuse to fly overhead, and in certain places, the wind seems to speak in an ancient tongue. In the heart of this watery forest, a small patch of land rises, damp, isolated, surrounded by reeds. Don Julián Santana chose to live there far from humanity on Isla de las Muñecas, Mexico, a place he believed to be cursed. And from that land steeped in legend and tears, the tragedy began. When a man chooses to live with dead dolls instead of fellow humans, he must be running from something. In the 1950s, amid the social upheaval in Mexico, a man named Don Julián Santana suddenly left behind his wife, his children, his job, and the world he once knew, to live alone on a patch of abandoned land in the middle of Xochimilco. No one knew why. No one went with him. Only the wind, the water, the reeds, and the whispers he claimed to hear every night kept him company. Locals from the Barrio de la Asunción remember that he often came to the village to sell vegetables picked from the island and drink a few cups of pulque, a traditional fermented drink made from the agave plant. But over time, people began to avoid him, not because of how he looked, but because of what he brought with him. Strange preachings, loud recitations of Bible verses in empty markets, and eyes that always seemed to be staring into something unseen. They say the drowned girl never left, that she's still playing hide and seek among the rotting tree branches. According to the only account that remains, from Don Julián Santana himself, one foggy morning, he saw a small body floating near the edge of the abandoned island where he lived. A little girl, drowned in silence, with no one coming to claim her body. No crying, no one searching. Next to her was an old doll, its curly hair matted, its cloth body soaked in water and mud. Don Julián pulled the doll from the canal, trembling. Driven by a deep belief that the girl's spirit had not yet moved on, he hung the doll on a tree, a prayer, a quiet ritual for the departed, a gesture of comfort, a wordless promise. But that's when strange things began to happen. He heard footsteps in the night. He heard the sound of the doll falling, only to find it back in its place again. At times, he swore the doll opened its eyes when he turned away. Faith turned into fear. Fear turned into action. He began collecting hundreds of dolls, hanging them all over the island, on tree branches, along the canal's edge, even inside the hut where he lived. Each doll was a shield against a spirit, or a metaphysical ritual he could never quite explain. And so, the legend of Isla de las Muñecas was born. No one but him ever saw the girl die. There was no record, no identity confirmed, only the dolls, and an old man who quietly turned an unproven event into one of Mexico's most chilling legends. The scariest thing isn't when the dolls look at you, it's when you hear them laugh.
Isla de las Muñecas is not silent, not at all. At night in the thick darkness, with water quietly flowing through the reeds, there are sounds that should not exist, sounds that are neither human nor animal. They're thin, faint, cold, and piercing, like a breath brushing against your ear. Then comes the crying. Broken, weak sobs like a child left alone in the forest, crying that no one hears, crying until the voice is gone. Visitors have reported that when boats stop near the island, they hear giggles echoing from the forest of dolls, high-pitched, distorted laughter that cuts in and out like a broken speaker. Some swear the doll hanging right in front of them slowly opened its eyes as if waking from a long sleep.
In documentary footage of Isla de las Muñecas, filmmakers have captured strange audio even when no one was on the island. Rhythmic tapping, the rustling of cloth, and most disturbingly, a faint sigh, as if a spirit were standing just behind the lens. One psychic once said, "This place isn't home to just one spirit. It belongs to a whole swarm of things that were forgotten." And haunted Doll Island, Mexico now seems to be the resting place of buried voices, cries left unanswered, laughter that never found a reply. If you ever hear a doll laugh, you'll understand. That's not life. That's loneliness stretched so far, it went mad.
"50 years, among broken dolls and ghostly cries. That's enough time to melt a man from the inside out." No one came to live with Don Julián. No one dared. For half a century, he lived alone in the swamp, in a damp shack surrounded by hundreds of decaying dolls. Each one hung at a moment when he felt like something was watching him. Locals called him a madman, but he didn't care. Because every night, he had to face the spirits that never slept. He said that sometimes, while sleeping, he'd be jolted awake by the sound of someone whispering right next to his ear. Words unclear, fading before he could make them out. When he stepped outside, each doll seemed to hold a fragment of memory, a voice, a nightmare, a stare from the past refusing to rest. Though alone, he carried on. Each week, he returned to Barrio de la Asunción, trading vegetables for pulque, then heading back to the island, bringing with him a few old dolls scavenged from trash heaps. To him, they weren't garbage. They were apologies. They were charms of protection. They were proof that he hadn't forgotten. Don Julián's mind slowly eroded under the weight of nameless voices. Some believed he was haunted. Others thought he was punishing himself for failing to save the girl. But one thing was clear to everyone. He was no longer the man he once was. His eyes no longer held the light of the living. His voice no longer spoke clearly. Only murmurs remained, and quiet nods to no one. The Don Julián Santana Barrera story isn't just the tragedy of a lost soul. It's the soundtrack to a place that has become the grave of invisible cries. When someone dies in the very place haunted by the ghost they feared most, that's no coincidence. That's a calling. The death of Don Julián Santana Barrera is the last thing anyone wants to believe was just a coincidence. Exactly 50 years after living among the forest of dolls, he was found drowned in the very same spot where he once said the little girl had died. The same place where he had hung the first doll on a leaning tree. His body floated quietly beneath the pale gray light of morning. No cries for help, no witness to his final moment. But legends don't need witnesses. People whisper, he didn't die by accident. Something else took him. According to folklore around Xochimilco, when night falls, the dolls on the island don't remain still. They move. They come to life. They search for a new body. It's believed that the spirit of the drowned girl was never at peace, and each night she wanders among the dolls, seeking a vessel suitable to possess. Don Julián, lonely, fragile, haunted, was the perfect target. The spirit entered him, controlled him, and then dragged him into the canal, ending a fated cycle in absolute silence. It's said that if anyone steps onto Isla de las Muñecas at exactly midnight, the girl's spirit may enter them, manipulating their mind, whispering cruel things into their thoughts, until they, too, throw themselves into the icy water. That's not a threat. That's a warning. Because on this island, death doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within you.
If everyone sees the doll move, is it truly a ghost or just synchronized panic in silence? Many believe that Isla de las Muñecas is nothing more than a product of imagination, a legend exaggerated to attract tourists. But when too many people hear giggles, whispers from dolls, or witness glass eyes slowly opening in the dark, every rational explanation begins to blur. Paranormal investigation teams from around the world have come here, armed with EMF meters, motion sensors, infrared cameras. The results? Sometimes nothing. Other times, the equipment flashes erratically when passing the very tree where the first doll was hung. Some footage has captured strange sounds, soft murmurs like children whispering. No wind, no people, no mechanical noise. So, are we witnessing a true supernatural phenomenon? Or just collective hallucination, triggered by a grim setting, chilling stories, and fear already planted in the mind? Psychologists call it the emotional contagion effect. When a group believes something so strongly, it begins to feel real. A rustling becomes footsteps, a snapping twig becomes laughter, and a doll dangling from a branch seems to look back at you. But there's one question no one has ever answered. Why do people who've never heard a single story about the island still feel they're not alone when they first arrive? Between reason and belief, science and legend, the island of the dolls lives on, either as a decades-long collective illusion or as a curse that still whispers through every cracked porcelain eye. Not everyone believes in ghosts until they leave Isla de las Muñecas,
carrying a voice that doesn't belong to them. In this modern world where people rush toward the light and explain everything with logic, Isla de las Muñecas still remains, silent, damp, and inexplicable. It's not a tourist destination like any other. It's a small tear in the fabric of reality, where belief, fear, guilt, and shattered memories gather into a form no one dares to name. It's the place where a man chose to live alone with hundreds of dolls, not to collect, not to play, but to atone. It's the place where a little girl, real or imagined, died, and her unrest seems to have never been cleansed. You may see it all as legend, superstition, or the delusion of a lonely man. But when you stand among thousands of soulless eyes, hear the wind howling through the dangling dolls, and feel the presence of something you can't name, you'll understand. Isla de las Muñecas doesn't need your belief. It only needs your presence and your silence. Maybe this island isn't cursed. Maybe no spirits rise each night. But what makes it different is the emotion people leave behind, the fear, the loss, the unfinished stories that remain trapped in every rotting doll, like letters never sent. And sometimes, if you're quiet enough, you'll hear them whisper, not to scare you, but to remind you there are souls in this world that don't need to be seen, only heard. You've just completed the journey through one of the most chilling and sorrowful legends in Mexico, and if you ever plan to visit Isla de las Muñecas, remember, the scariest thing might not be the dolls.